Assalamu alaikum everyone, and good afternoon to everybody and those who are joining us online as well, depending on which time zone you're joining from. Good day to you. My name is Kulsum Ghayas. I chair the organizing committee for the Sixth Sense Forum, and it's always a pleasure to welcome both our physical and nowadays our online audience as well. The Sixth Sense Forum, you've been seeing from the video that's been playing for the past 10 minutes or so, it's been around since 2009. So we've organized over 60 of such events. And as you saw from the video, this is really a platform to be able to celebrate things beyond medicine. So what we celebrate here is arts and sciences. We really believe that open discourse is the bedrock of any good academic institution. So the topics have ranged from everything from astronomy and art to political science. We've had music before, and we're delighted we'll be talking about music again today. Literature. These speakers have come from all over, some of them from even within the institution, many from Pakistan, and again, like our speaker today, many from even outside the country. We also have a series called Apna Pakistan and Apna Karachi, where we try to identify the myriad problems that we face, but we try to address them from the perspective of possible solutions. So we're delighted that we've returned mostly to in-person sessions in 6SF. There are many, I think we have several people signed in online. So again, welcome to all of them. I'm very grateful to the support of all the people that really make this possible. It's not a one-man show by any means. I get to be the face of it, I say this every time, but the organizing committee does all the heavy lifting from behind, so thank you to them. But moreover, it's all these other folks behind the scenes that I want to give a shout out to before we begin. This is in no particular order, but really we couldn't do this without them. There's AD, IT, electronics, conference secretariat, many cases housekeeping and food services, public affairs for their many contributions. And again, all of you, our audience who continue to be our driving force. Just a couple housekeeping announcements to start with. I'll request everybody who is present here in person to keep their cell phones on silent. And for those of you who can, request you to move up front and move in so those who join us later can fill in the seats as they come in. So, it's now my privilege to introduce our speaker and performer for today, Rizwan Jagani. Rizwan is an American violist of both Indian and Pakistani origin. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Austin College. He has a Master of Music Performance degree from Carnegie Mellon University and an Artist Diploma, where he was the first recipient from the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. Rizwan is currently pursuing a Doctor of Musical Arts degree from Catholic University of America as a student of Alison Goodman. A new fit physician, it's a term that's been coined by Violist and his mentor Tatiana Shamis of the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. Rizwan's a huge advocate for pushing boundaries both musically and culturally. He reimagines the idea of what the viola can do, combining his formal training in Western classical performance with other musical genres such as Bollywood, musical theater, pop rock, and more. And I know we're going to be privileged to hear some of this today. As a South Asian in Western classical music, Rizwan has made it a point to combat stereotypes by bringing awareness to his cultural community, the importance and relevance of careers in the performing arts, while proudly representing his culture in the field. Again, we hope you'll be hearing about this as he talks to us today. You can also hear him on various podcasts and interviews, and we've put up his social media links up there on the slide that will stay up throughout. Please do go visit them. Again, we look forward to hearing some of his renditions today, but you can find classical renditions on viola of famous songs such as called studio favorites Tajware Haram and Pasturi, Orpheus, which is one of my favorites, and Defying Gravity from the Broadway musical Wicked. Rizwan is an advocate for music education and believes in the importance of mentoring and guiding the next generation while striving to bring forth new ideas to keep the classical music world alive. He maintains a wide performance variety as a solo artist, along with an affinity for orchestral and chamber music repertoire. When not performing or teaching, he enjoys time with his friends and family, and I think that's what has brought him to Pakistan this time. We're delighted to be welcoming many of his family members who are here to listen to him, including his grandmother. Thank you so much for joining us. He also enjoys traveling, fitness, food, and binging on Broadway musical. It's really my pleasure to invite Rizwan to speak about a South Asian American's musical adventure, redefining cultural and professional norms, and we look forward to the performance.
Thank you all for having me. Before I begin, I just want to say that it is almost a full circle moment that I'm performing here today in Aga Khan University, because when this hospital institution opened, my mom, Azra Rajab Ali at the time, was one of the first doctors here. So it really is a full circle moment. I'm sure my mom woke up early to watch this on Zoom, coming from Washington, D.C. So, hi Mom, and I hope you all enjoy. So I'm going to open with a little bit of music, and then I will talk. So I decided to open today's discussion with a piece by a Hungarian composer named Miklos Rózsa. This piece was written in 1968, and it was actually the last piece he wrote. It's called The Introduction and Allegro for Solo Viola. Just played a little clip of it because in actuality it's about 10 minutes long of lyricism, light melodies, and then brute force. But what's interesting is he actually made a big chunk of his career in Hollywood. If you've seen the movie Ben-Hur, you know this music. This is actually by Miklos Rózsa. And the reason why I wanted to open with him is because as somebody who does multiple genres, it lets you in a little bit into my world. So I play an instrument called the viola. Looks like a violin, but is not. I often like to say that if rich chocolate had a sound, it would be the viola. So the one thing about classical music is it is very often portrayed interestingly in popular culture, either as the genre that a character falls asleep to, or something that is often used in a form of humor, and we have the Looney Tunes to thank for that. So I'm going to play a few pieces for you right now, and if you know these pieces, please raise your hand. Okay, clap your hands. Yeah. Piece number 2. Okay, last one. Okay. So the first piece I played was by Johann Sebastian Bach, his prelude to his cello suite in G major. The second piece I played was Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik, or Serenade. And the final piece was the Andi Freude theme of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. I'm sure all of these we've heard before, if not in popular culture, at least on an ancient Nokia phone ringtone bank. At least I am sure I have. So that's why I wanted to let you in a little bit into my world. Now, in the era of social media, if we were to go on any of these platforms that were mentioned earlier, and looked up the hashtag South Asians in Western classical music, this is actually a thing, you will find composers, conductors, educators, and performers. We do exist. Beyond the hashtag, I'm going to explain a little bit about my identity. I was born in America, my father is Indian and my mother is Pakistani, and I perform and teach on the viola. I do this professionally. It's not a hobby. So you're probably wondering, how did I come to this path? When I was about 10 years old, entering middle school, 6th standard, I think is what it would be called here, we were required to join a musical program, at least for a year, and then it was our choice whether or not we chose to continue it. So I had a friend that played the viola, and just like any child of that age, thought that, oh, if this guy thinks it's cool, it must be cool. That's actually why I picked the instrument. And I hated playing it for the first 2 years. Because one thing people don't realize is that in the orchestra, the melody is given to the violins, and the accompaniment harmony is given to the viola. The other thing that comes with the viola are the viola jokes. Yes, there are jokes about our instrument, and I'll tell you one right now. How do you prevent your violin from getting stolen? You put it in the viola case. Needless to say, I actually did fall in love with this instrument. I felt like it was something I could truly express myself through, and I didn't do sports, so music was my thing. And my parents firmly believed that if I was going to do something like this, that I should do it to the highest caliber possible. So they made it a point that I took lessons, and that I tried to aim for the highest orchestras or the extra little goodie bits that almost any South Asian parent wants for their child. However, when it came time to going to college, I guess you could say I might have been coerced. I wasn't. I actually truly wanted to go into the medical field. I'd been doing science fair projects, all medical based, won awards with them, even interned at the National Institutes of Health in Maryland for 2 consecutive summers as a high schooler. So needless to say, one would argue that, I was poised to be in the medical field. A year into undergrad, I discovered it wasn't for me. A little bit too much focus on grades. I enjoyed learning the stuff, I didn't enjoy taking tests, so I decided to go into engineering. I had mentioned that my mom was a doctor very early on before I performed. My dad's an engineer. So needless to say, if not one, then the other. So I tried engineering, and until I met my friend vector calculus and differential equations, life had different plans. The whole time I had been doing music in undergrad as well. I'd been doing it as a minor. And I had truly fallen in love with the process. I enjoyed practicing. I enjoyed spending hours working on the instrument, discovering something new, whether it was working on something with great difficulty or working on something that I just wanted to play for my friends or for my family. So when I decided to pursue music professionally, it was in the 3rd year of my undergrad. I switched my major for the 2nd time. So I finished with a music major and a Spanish minor at Oxford College. Sí, también yo hablo español. 2 years after undergrad, I pursued my master's, which was 2 years. Then I did my artist diploma, which I finished through the COVID-19 pandemic. And now I'm starting my 2nd year of my doctoral degree. So yes, I will become Dr. Jagani. But I like to call myself a soul doctor because of the profound effect that music has on the soul. Now, this decision of deciding to pursue music professionally, it opened up a very interesting conversation on what it meant to be in a respectable profession. Needless to say, I had 2 similar but different viewpoints in my own household. My dad often wondered about my financial stability, and my mom wondered, what are people going to say? Because let's just be honest for a second, the tea parties are not about the beverages. let that one simmer for a second. There's juicier content to discuss. I also had the Indian versus Pakistani mentality difference. If I met anybody from India and I told them I was doing music professionally, they would say, oh, you can be the next A.R. Rahman. Interestingly enough, he and I are both born on January 6th. And if I spoke to a Pakistani about it, they would often say, oh, you have to be like Atif Aslam or Ali Sethi to make something. But this is when I would propose the question, did people know who Beyonce was until Beyonce became Beyonce? Everyone had to start somewhere. For those that are joining online, students, you are here because you are starting somewhere to go into the world. And many of us that are in the room and online are here because you started somewhere at some point in life to get to where you are today. And you are continuing to go somewhere. So what does it mean to have a background in music performance and music education? Performing is not just playing an instrument. Performing an instrument and learning music is the discovery of language, culture, personality, and history through artistic storytelling. And in my case, artistic storytelling without words. It is a form of time traveling, if you think about it. I played a piece from 1968. Only through music and in any other type, and in most art forms, can you, in the current time of 2022, look back into the past and see what someone was thinking, what was someone going through. Beethoven wrote the Ninth Symphony completely deaf. And there are other composers that really did things with the viola. The composer Paul Hindemith, who was a violist himself and wrote very prolifically for the instrument, wrote during a time where there was unrest, World War I. He wrote this piece that I'm going to play for you guys, just a little bit of it because it will probably annihilate me in the process. It is from his solo viola sonata, and the top of this section of the piece in German says, Tonschönheit ist Nebensache, which means beauty of tone is of minor importance. So reflect on that for a second, and now I will play it. That one is on my YouTube channel if you want to see it. I'm not going to play it right now. So needless to say, hearing that, you know that this man was going through something very, very disturbing. Why else would he even write beauty of tone is of minor importance? Because there was nothing to celebrate at that time. And just like I am telling you all this information and letting you into my world, brings forth the idea of music education, which goes beyond the discussion we are having today, where we are all learning. What I teach, and what is actually the bulk of what most musicians do, and this is sort of how we are taught in our training, is that we become teachers of our instruments. So I teach viola one-on-one, and I have had many students. I have one student right now in the Maryland area. I'm hoping to get more. And I've learned that through teaching, it is not only sharing knowledge from one generation to the other. You help someone develop as a human being, as a person, emotionally. They develop a sense of personal responsibility because now they have to do things and be held accountable for them. My student is 13 years old, and sometimes many students start even younger. I found a very interesting thing on Twitter by Von Fleischfresser, and this was posted on the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra's website. If you want young people to work together, put them in a music ensemble. If you want them to listen to each other, put them in a music ensemble. If you want them to learn the importance of personal responsibility, put them in a music ensemble. If you want them to connect, put them in a music ensemble. Music goes beyond just playing the instrument and beyond just teaching one-on-one. There's more to it. My mentor, Tatiana Shamis, who coined the term new fit musician for me, this came from a conversation I had with her very early on in the pandemic, When I told her that being a Western classical musician that does different styles, I often got, not so kind remarks from the older generation of the classical musicians. And in the South Asian world, there was a little bit of discomfort that I will elaborate on. So I said I was a misfit. She said, misfit, no. New fit, yes. I told her since then I'm going to be putting that on any publicity possible. And she knows that too, because it's an idea of carving your own personal identity. Well, one of the things that she taught me in my first lessons with her at Carnegie Mellon University were the 3 P's: purpose, preparation, and poise. Why are we doing something? How do we go about doing it? And that little bit of confidence that you can feel, just know, hey, I can actually do this. That's not just a music lesson, that's a life lesson. So, and the final part about music education in general, teaching, is that you become more confident and you solidify your own educational matter. I teach, so I have to know how to do something in order to properly explain it. I'm sure many of us, and to many of us online, we have been in a situation where we've sat on the dining room table with a parental figure, usually the father, crying because we can't get our math homework in order. That was most of my childhood with my dad. And when I finally got the math questions right, my dad would ask me to explain what I just did. We learn things in technical jargon, but my dad would often say that unless you can explain this to a 3-year-old, you do not know what you're talking about. So I challenge everybody in this room today, faculty and students, to find something you enjoy, so whatever it is, and to find something with which you struggled, and find 3 ways of explaining it. You will discover something about yourself. What I discovered about myself was if there was something that I struggled with a lot, it was easier to teach it. Things that come naturally are often harder to teach. So it makes you dive deeper into yourself to think, how can I do this? How can I explain this? To me, it's easy. To others, it might be hard. So now that you know a little bit about me in the Western classical field, I'm pretty much at home there. How do I bring that into our culture? Being a South Asian musician in the Western classical world usually means that in an orchestra, I'm the only musician of my ethnic background. Right now, I sit principal viola of the Catholic University Symphony Orchestra, which is great because it's not only a bragging right to say you're a first chair, but it is a leadership role, and it puts me in a position where I feel like I can do something for the orchestra, within the orchestra. But again, I'm the only one of my ethnic background. Now, how do I bring forth that even more? When I do solo performances, even if it's Western classical music, you will often see me wear shalwar kameez, because it is a way of showing in this predominantly white-driven world how proud I am as a brown-skinned musician to represent myself on that stage. Unapologetically, I might add. But now when I bring that world here, it becomes different. I often find much opposition. Whenever people are craving for creative ideas, something new, it's 2022 after all, we need something new. I bring the viola. The world always needs more viola. I often am faced with opposition, but not like that. In a culture where singing is glorified, and if you think about it, singing uses one thing, and that is language to tell a story. Well, when you are telling stories without words, you are transcending that bridge of language, and you have made something universal. What is wrong with that? I also don't play a traditional instrument. Don't ask me how I feel about tabla players, because the tabla players always get the props. And violists, on the other hand, depending on the day. But why is this the case? I'm sure we've all seen an instrument like this. Shah Rukh Khan fakes it very poorly in Mohabbatein. If any of you meet him, tell him to give me a call, I'll teach him. That being said, if that's our only form of exposure, of being aware of something, of course our view is going to be like this. And when that view is reinforced, it becomes a norm. That is why, when someone wants to pursue a career in the arts, we look at them and wonder, does this person not have the aptitude to become a doctor or an engineer? It's a different way of using the brain. So what can we do to redefine the stage that has been set? I last gave a talk like this in 2019. In that amount of time, we faced a global pandemic, and in my country, a social justice uprising because of Black Lives Matter and the lack of awareness to cultural diversity in workplaces. Now we see a plethora of colored representation in the classical music field. You have Indian American composers, Brazilian American composers writing things, which also allows us to keep the present alive into the future. I'm playing music by dead white composers who lived in the 1800s, but if we are not preserving the art or the science of today, what will the people 50 years later have to say about us? In the walls of a medical institution, you're probably reading literature that was written decades ago, but the 2022 edition. At the same time, you're also writing new literature, new discoveries, and new ideas are being added to pass on. Similar thing works with music. So how do we learn more? All of you all are here today because you wanted to learn something. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Discover more. Empower yourself. Knowledge is power. The lack of respect comes from a lack of understanding. So go ahead, dive into more Beethoven symphonies. They're lovely. I have one tattooed on me. Not gonna show you. Listen to Mozart's Requiem, one of the last pieces he wrote. Listen to the Antartete Musik, the degenerate music that was said by the Nazis for all modern music in Europe during the early 1920s. How different are we right now when we see somebody that wants to have a bright career in the arts, tell them that this is just a hobby, this isn't a career. We have to empower ourselves with knowledge, share that knowledge, and empower others. So to all of you, if you have artistic friends, let them know that you see them, you see their work. And if you have any way of supporting them, support them. Let them know that you share their posts if you're on social media. Go to their concerts, go to their events, buy their stuff. Buy it. Do not be lazy and ask for a discount. If they give you one, that's on them. More and more I think about it, if you think in general, change does not happen overnight. Beyond this conversation, words have to be put into action. A fire does not come out of its own. A fire comes from a spark that was fueled to become a flame. Sometimes there's wind, sometimes there's water that might put out the fire, but the fire continues to grow. Just like we saw with the social justice uprising in the States, and now our conscious changes to understand that, hey, certain things are not acceptable, that we have to do better. We as a culture can do better. We know we can. But we wonder what other people will say. We wonder what we have to say knowing what we've been told. Time to change that. When the world was restarting after the COVID-19 pandemic, needless to say, we are still in it. The new normal was passed around, where we had to change how we thought about how the world worked and how we as humans fit into this new world, how it meant we could get our lives back, how artists could be on concert stages again and not worry about getting sick and not worry about losing their livelihoods. We as a culture have to make this new normal by immersing ourselves in something new, empowering ourselves with this new knowledge, and taking it into the world and being unapologetic about sharing it with our friends, with our family, with our peers. Because on the same stage, you have a doctor, an engineer, and a musician. At the end of the day, on a stage, you have three humans who can all coexist and be respected. Thank you all.